comments for the things that are not on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, do I come up there?
Sure.
This seems like such a goal.
Yeah. Videotape, but we're being recorded, I believe.
Have a seat. I'm Dan Atherton, and I am here on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy to
Maybe the microphone for the TV, so people at home can hear.
request. Is that close enough? Or should I
don't know.
change
I
it?
don't know.
Pull it towards you. No, you're all right. You're all right.
I hate talking with my back to people. It's like against my grain. And we wanted to respectfully ask that we have a post-town meeting discussion, Article 69. And Article 69 had to do with the management of town's coastal resources, and it was a bit complicated. And we just thought, for clarification purposes, we'd like to go over it with you so you understand it as we understand it. Now, I don't know if you're planning another meeting that you could put it on the agenda. If not, we could talk about it now.
I don't see why.
Just a couple of comments. It's not on the agenda.
It's not
Right.
on this.
So it's probably not appropriate to have a discussion on something that's not on the agenda. Secondly, I'm not sure what that would have to do with the finance committee. That might be more of an appropriate board of selectmen agenda item. Depending on what specifically we should-
Well, it actually has to do with the FinCom recommendation. So,
The not to adopt recommendation?
pardon?
The not to adopt recommendation?
The not to adopt recommendation. And we would just like we'd like an opportunity to just clarify it with all of you. It was a confusing article. It caused us confusion. We did not sponsor the article. It was a citizens article. And I won't go into it, but essentially, as we understand it, it made no difference whether it was adopted or not. The salient section, Section E, is the operable section. That's why we didn't call it a town meeting, but we just wanted to make sure that you all understood that, because it's important, because it involves the approval of town meeting for the use of town-owned coastal property. So it's really, and we decided, we had talked with the chairman, with your chairman, before town meeting, thinking maybe we would come back and request before town meeting for you to reconsider your recommendation. When we studied it and realized it was moot, I know it sounds confusing without going into the details. Since it's moot, we wouldn't call it, but what we would do is we would come after town meeting to just go over it with you for like 5 or 10 minutes. So that's...
Yeah. I mean, I thought that if we had made a motion not to adopt and the motion wasn't called, doesn't the article sort of evaporate? And the article has to be resubmitted for the next town meeting, whether it be the special one in the fall or
Right.
I'm not sure that it has.
Is it your stand that you just want to clarify?
We just want to
I mean, if it's a
clarify that
citizens-
you understood,
Well,
because we didn't understand it.
Well, that's why it probably did pass. I mean, it's a citizens article, so I don't think we relate the confusion to you and your efforts. I think we understand that maybe somebody didn't do their due diligence enough to express themselves the way they should have. So,
All right, well, maybe what I should do, if you would permit me, I can just hand out the information and you could just read over it. The article, which is just one sentence, it refers to Chapter 27 of the bylaw, and then your recommendation, and you can see that it didn't really matter, that this, again, the important provision, which was Section E, stands no matter. And I think from our point of view, we just felt like clarification was good at this point in the process going forward.
right. Me personally don't think that you associate you directly with obviously a citizens article, and if they, like I said, made it confusing, I don't think that's a reflection on you or the article or the bylaw. So
Thank you.
that's just me.
We're not, right, I absolutely, and it was not our article, and we looked at it just as you looked at it. And when we looked at it, we weren't quite sure we understood your recommendation, and that's why we met with Mr. Kelly. And at that time, he said that he would come back and ask you to reconsider the recommendation. But then when we studied it, we realized that it was no longer germane because the parts that were being stricken were expired. And that the important part, which is the part that town meeting said they would like to have a vote, have an approval for the use of town-owned coastal land, stood whether the article was adopted or not. And we're just not, we went back to the minutes and that wasn't part of your discussion. So it's important to us, to the citizens who care about this, that you, the members of the Finance Committee, understand that.
Okay.
So I can just leave this with
Sure.
you?
Absolutely.
Why don't I just leave the?
Doesn't affect anything.
It's just,
I think that's fine. I don't know, I was wondering whether to give it to Cliff. Cliff is the acting chairperson.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Kelly has resigned since he was elected as a selectman. so-
yes. Things happen quickly, 24 hours. Just in here, we made 10 copies. It's the copy of the article, which is very short, and then the copy of the bylaw, which is equally brief, and then the minutes from your Finance Committee when you had the discussion on January 21st, just so it all makes sense to you when you go through it.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, we thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to review of reserve fund transfers. We have a request for the Salt Marsh Center, correct?
Yeah.
For $16,000 for apparently disconnecting plumbing, dishwashers, sinks, removal of mold, and different items.
So this is an unorthodox request. This is not a building owned by the town. We are a tenant in the building. The town uses the building. There is a group, some of whom are here, called the Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs. It's a nonprofit group that owns the building and has, for the most part, been maintaining it until very recently. There's also a town-appointed group called the Council on Aging, which oversees the programming in the building. The town has staff in the building that operates programs and functions in the building. There's some level of use outside of the town. They congregate at lunch, for example. They use the kitchen. The kitchen is in poor condition. We've had someone assess its condition. It needs some work, quite frankly, and I think that people probably know as well. We're really worried that if we start doing this work, we're going to find a lot of other things that are wrong. And once that happens, you all well know, the thing is opened up, and now we're not going to be able to close it until it's fixed. And we're hoping it isn't going to be more than the amount that we're requesting, but we don't really know. So the unorthodox part about it is that you've got these sort of different groups that have differing roles in the past maintenance of the building. I think they've come to us and said they have no money to do really anything to the building, is my understanding, and are really asking the town to do the repairs. We do use the building as this town-operated senior center, so there's some level of responsibility, I think, on our part to help. But we are worried, so I think I'm sort of cautioning that if we open things up, we might be back.
So to clarify, Libby, this is the first time this has happened, that the town has been asked for funds?
I think the town has, Rachel may know a little bit more, or Larry, we have fixed some things in the past. This is probably one of the more costly, in-depth repairs. The NCEA has done more sort of cosmetic things. But this is a deep repair, I would say.
What are the alternatives?
Good question. I guess the alternatives are to keep going until we don't need the health code anymore, which might not be too much longer. We have discussed a little bit about alternate locations, and there's not a whole lot of options, although we'd be forced to look at that if we don't have the kitchen. I we don't have a kitchen there at all. And the congregate lunch would have to find a different location. People, probably know better than I do what other uses of the kitchen there are. I mean, there's the, like the men's breakfast thing.
The men's breakfast, any breakfast, lunch, they do the men's breakfast that they have. Mother's Day, luncheon and stuff.
So there's use
But it's
of,
mostly the elder services congregate meals that,
so there's, the use of the kitchen would end, and the groups that use it would have to find a different.
So there's no, the rest of the building, there's no jeopardy with the rest of the building. We're just talking about the kitchen.
I think we're just talking about the kitchen, although it is not a building that's in really awesome condition. It's just not.
And I think in the emails, it was described that part of the issue may be mold, right? So that's maybe not
Just the kitchen.
just the kitchen. I mean, if it gets out of control, or they open up something that could, or possibly asbestos, I think, below the linoleum was mentioned. That was in
It was
the
in one
email
of
here.
the memos that there was possibility of asbestos. I think the flooring, the linoleum itself may be asbestos-based or something.
I see.
What's the medium-term plan for the building from a capital, programmatic basis?
We don't have any long-term capital project plan there. I think our long-term goal, which has yet to be fully explored and developed, is to have the senior center elsewhere. And until that happens, though, we're where we are, unless there's some way to move somewhere else that we don't know about.
Does the town pay rent for use of the building?
No, and we own no land. So it's sort of a, we own the land, we own the building.
Two not-for-profits. The town owns the land. Somebody else owns the building.
But to clarify, we've done things like fixed private roads, I mean, maintained, potholes, and, I mean, the town does other things to that
There's
effect.
a very specific process for private roads, for example. But I'll give a bit of another example. The VFW recently came to us and said, we're going to shut down unless the town takes over all the utilities. We said, no, thank you. We own the land, they own the building, we have a lease with them. It's sort of a similar situation. We don't have the level of programming there that we have here, although our Veterans Agent's office is there. And so we're a little concerned about, we don't want to set a precedent. We don't want to look as though there's some kind of favoritism thing going on. But it's just unusual. And quite honestly, this isn't a program item in our public buildings budget. We have those funds committed to a lot of other projects, so we can't really free anything up to deal with this.
Could we accelerate the plan and maybe enter into an agreement with the VFW?
We
And
could look into that, I guess. I don't know if anybody has.
I mean, I'm throwing it out. Is that something that fits? I mean, they certainly have the space. They have the kitchen. Sounds like they're underutilized.
Do we want to invite some of these people up to talk?
Well, I figured we'd ask questions of the board when we're done.
We could, I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, we could explore that, but in the meantime, this kitchen's gonna be not functional.
All right. Sure. Is everybody done? Yeah, if you'd like to speak.
I'm Julie Fitzgerald, I'm a member of the board of NCEA, which is the
Sure.
Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs, and there is some sort of odd history behind this, so that might help. With us is our treasurer, Jean Grimmer, two of our vice presidents, Steve Bender and Deb Killen, and our president is Nancy Swain, and she couldn't be here. But kind of a real brief history. NCEA is a 501c3 corporation. It was created in 1975, basically for various purposes that relate to services and programming for the benefit of seniors. Fortunately, in 1978, one of our Nantucket residents named Dorothy Souza donated her property on Union Street, and that was the senior center for a period of time. Wasn't adequate space, wasn't good parking, so forth. So at some point in time, the town and NCEA got together, leased to us, the property land was donated to the town where the current Saltmarsh Center exists today. The town then leased it to NCEA, and in 1985, NCEA built the current building on the property with the funds from that donation. So that's where it's been since then. We do have a lease that was approved by town meeting in 1983, which is really only a couple of pages long. It doesn't really address sort of the current use of the building and how things have transpired. It's pretty minimal. It doesn't, things have kind of morphed over the years. The town does now pay the utilities. I don't think they originally did. They covered us on their, well, they have insurance on the building. We're not on the policy as an additional insured, some other issues we need to deal with. We don't pay rent for the land, or it's $1. The town doesn't pay rent to use the building. But for basically the last 30 or 40 years, as a result of the donation and the work of NCEA, basically the town hasn't had any burden to provide for the building for the senior center, and that's all been taken care of by the 501c3 organization. So that's sort of where we are today. So basically the NCEA has been functioning and taking care of and basically bearing all of the expenses of this building for the past 30 years. We sort of had an inactive board for NCEA for a number of years. We've since sort of reconstituted the board, and we've been looking at short-term and long-term planning. And that's really what led us to come to the town and request some financial assistance. You know, the building's 30 years old. We need capital improvements, maintenance and repair. We did hire a professional building inspector, Angelo Di Benedictis, and he did do a study of the building to give us a better report, so we have some idea what's coming our way. We met with Libby back in October. But we've also been really diligent in trying to maintain the building. I mean, it maybe sounds like we're not doing anything, but just this past year we spent $20,000 for repairs and maintenance. We had to replace and retile a bathroom floor, general maintenance, landscaping, painting. You know, we're also paying all the landscaping expenses. You know, the building's in a very exposed area. It's in a flood zone between the water damage potentially and the winds down there. You know, it gets quite a beating. So there's now, at 30 years old, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the building. Again, we've been bearing the cost. We're trying to do everything we can. We're trying to do more fundraising that was done in the past. And I guess the alternative is, you know, we've been providing this and providing the space for the town. If it's no longer adequate or safe space for seniors to be in, then it really puts the burden on the town to come out, find some alternative space. We would like to work with the town, the Council on Aging, to try to use the existing space for as long as possible. And I think that brings us not just from today's proposal, but I think just the overall long-term and long-range planning, you know, for a senior center for the town. I think it's kind of clear that it's probably has outgrown the space. There's parking issues always and that kind of things, but that's long-term. So today I think we're really looking at the immediate needs of the Saltmarsh Center. You know, basically the programming there, it's the congregate lunch, and that's sort of where the kitchen issue comes in. But, you know, the rest of the building, you know, we have senior activities, exercise classes, computer classes, bridge, movies, games, crafts, health and wellness programs, and so forth. So that's what the senior center provides. So it seems like it's something the community, with all of us working together, need to try to keep going. I think there's a value in keeping the congregate lunch in the same location where the people do some of these other activities. We don't get any kind of lease from the town for the town using it, so we've been putting in all these costs and expenses. So whether it ends up being some potentially lease where we can help pay for some of these expenses, or at least for this particular project, to see if the town can assist us to make this work and keep the congregate lunch there.
So I have a question. With that inspection report that was done, you mentioned, was it a bathroom that had to get tiled, and then now this floor in the kitchen, or whatever this work is.
Right.
Are there other areas that came up in the report that are?
As far as we know, there was just a limited area, I believe, that maybe somebody recalls. It was just some certain floor joists that they felt needed to be repaired and shored up. And there was something called, was it white mold or something? It wasn't, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like some black mold, you know, oh goodness, what do we have facing us here? He seemed to indicate it wasn't an enormous problem to get them fixed. It just needed to be fixed.
How many people does the Saltmarsh Center serve?
I don't know, do you know what the congregate lunch serves?
I mean, are we talking 20 people a day, 100 people a day? I mean, what's sort of...
It's not 100. 20 would be a better guesstimate.
And
The
the-
lunch itself or the program throughout?
I'm just sort of wondering the
Well,
daily
the salt
programming.
marsh
I mean, just roughly, is this, I don't,
I would say the salt marsh programming, the people that are in and out, would probably be closer to 100, especially if there's a fitness day. But just the congregate meal itself, I mean, I can get that number, but
I mean, I was just,
Pretty low.
yeah. And the programs, the programs that are run during the Salt Marsh Center during the day, sort of proportionate, how much are town-supported or run programs, and how much are programs at the Salt Marsh Center as just historically, I don't know, bridge, you know, are those things town programs, or those,
it's all for the town seniors.
so all town-operated or sponsored activities? Okay.
But we underwrite some of the costs of the bridge and some of the other programs, I believe, yes. You know, I think the other thing, we pay for the senior awards luncheon, and there's another,
The Elder Expo.
right, the Elder Expo. So those are other things the NCEA provides.
And NCEA, your primary asset is this piece of property, is the
The
building
building,
itself, right?
yes.
The land is town-owned. Okay.
Right, yes.
And you basically raise charitable funds to support the expenses you've been putting
Right,
into the program.
yes. It appears from historically that most of the money came from the original donation to NCEA with some fundraising on an annual basis. And I think, again, because it was a new building in 1985, there weren't a lot of expenses, and now we're just finding that, you know, it's becoming very expensive to deal with it.
Yeah.
Jean,
It's about 25,000 a year, which includes some maintenance. We're dealing with a lot of deferred maintenance that hasn't been addressed. So last year, last fiscal year, and this fiscal year, our maintenance, repairs, painting expenditures far exceed the amount that we put into programming. And our charter is actually to support programming.
And are you getting, funds are made up through fundraising from a foundation or?
Some foundation grants, some individual gifts. Some people come in with, $100 in their hand. And there are yard sales, what else? Sort of small scale fundraising events.
But there are no other assets other than the building itself? You don't have an endowment or anything like that?
That's correct.
With these increased costs occurring, this project notwithstanding, is there more money in the budget being put toward maintenance and repairs and so forth?
We're really struggling to
Budget.
try to come up with figuring how to make this work and allow the facility to remain open as the Salt Marsh Center. You know, I think we are looking at in 5 years that both the building, may not be suitable any longer for these purposes. I think we're concerned about, the growing senior population. There may be more needs. There's always sort of the parking issue. And I think there's been some possible discussions about when and if the Island Home is moved out, that maybe some of the facility would be, a senior center as well. We did have Emmett Schmarshkoff, he's the gentleman from the state, come down and meet with us and the Nantucket Council on Aging. And he said, we do have a unique situation. Of course, being Nantucket, we're the only place that at this point a nonprofit organization owns the building and is basically performing the function that we are for a community. In general, the communities are basically supporting and providing, the senior centers for their senior citizens. So it's a different situation.
What's the likelihood on a probability basis, and maybe addressed over here, that this is the right number? 50%? 100%? Well, I know not 100, but 70?
Well, we had a local contractor look at it as well, and his estimate came in pretty close to that, actually. I think the unknown is, what is something gonna be uncovered when they open up the walls? So we looked at it from the DPW point of view, and just because maybe there was something we could sort of do as a interim measure, or just to get bring it back up, and it's beyond anything that we can do internally. We really need a contractor to do it, and it's so we would from
you north of 50% probability that this is a good number, or are you south of 50%?
I think that's my best guess at it. I mean,
If we were to approve this amount,
So it's 16, but the quote is for 15, right? And we were asking 16, just
okay,
to,
so there's some contingency in there. Is there additional money that the organization has to, if it runs over by $500 or $1,000, will you be back here, or is that an amount of money that you think you can raise?
Well, I think for that, if that's the money, I think we're talking 5,000, 10,000 or more, we start to get into trouble, but, again, we'd have to have board approval. That's probably something if it was within that range. I think the board generally is, at this point, because we've undertaken so many other projects, and it's used for the congregate lunch and basically that, we're sort of hoping that, the town could take on that responsibility for this particular project.
Right. So my concern isn't so much about this particular project, it's all the projects that are going to come after it. So I think what I'd like to see, and maybe you need board approval for this, and I wouldn't want to delay this appropriation for that reason, but I'd like some commitment that there would be an overall building analysis and some estimate of what the capital projects for this building might be over the next 5 years, if that's the minimum length of time that we intend to use this building. So the town, if it's going to be requested that more money comes from the town to pay for capital projects, we know what we're in for.
One of our concerns is that if any of you have looked at the building recently, you will see that the paintwork is really atrocious. It does not present itself as an attractive place to go. So we are about to paint the exterior, and in doing that, we know we're going to run into a ton of repairs that need to be done. We've already identified windows that are not in good shape and that sort of thing. We have bids right now in the region of about $16,000 for just painting the trim, but there's a lot of trim. It has been let go, so there's, the amount of labor involved is a pretty big undertaking. And we're going to do that. But when the kitchen presented itself as an issue, we knew that we couldn't do that as well.
So, forget about this request. If you could wave your magic wand, what's your answer? I mean, it sounds like putting money into this building for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, while other plans play out, is putting good money after bad.
That's correct.
I mean, what would you guys, in a perfect world, like to see happen?
Well, as Judy told you, we have met with Liddy and Greg and begun to have a conversation about a long-range plan for a senior center other than on that particular site. And as Liddy told us very clearly, that, that was going to take some time, a lot of time. If memory serves me correctly, I think that you thought 3 to 5 years, with probably 5 being more realistic. So that's our planning window right now. So when we look at requests that come in, we're looking at, will this last for 5 years?
I think that's right. I think that's what we're planning for, is trying to keep it going for 5 years. So I think we've had the inspection done, so I think we have a pretty good idea of where we stand. Again, we have the risk that when we do the painting, there's rotten wood, rotten windows, and so forth. So we're trying to work on that project. I think we've checked the roof. There's always potential plumbing or heating issue. We've spent money on that in the last couple of years as well. So we kind of think with this last project, there's always more to do in a 30-year-old building. If I look at my own house, there's always another project to do. But we think that'll handle the worst of it for now, to keep things going and functioning as they do today. There's always cosmetic things that we could do to improve it. We all want sort of the really wonderful senior center and it looking good and being as spiffy as possible. So we're trying to do that. But this is sort of a kind of a guts part of it that we would hope the town could step in and help. Again, it's sort of been 30, 40 years the town hasn't had to provide this kind of expense, and I know it's an expense, and I know it's, we're looking at maybe 5 years or whenever we have a new center available. So that's what we're sort of asking the town to sort of contribute to some of this cost.
What happens if we open up the walls, we get this appropriation, we open things up, and it costs another $10,000? What do we do? Just, we run, have an emergency meeting? I mean, what?
Well, that, and we start fundraising as well.
Okay.
It's not that we're trying to just dump everything. We're trying to work with you. We're trying to do as much as we can. The current board has worked really diligently to try to, address these issues that have kind of been left undone for a while. And again, 30-year-old building is what's facing us now. So, yeah, I mean, we'll do the best we can and try to do more fundraising. I mean, we do have some more active people in fundraising. We have 4 fundraisers. We're trying to get on the ground and off and running this year to try to help some of these expenses. So.
I think we all agree it should look nice, but if we're talking about the kitchen versus next year the painting, maybe things like that, and the thought to project anyway, the digging on the floor, or something like that. But that's, I'm not sure that's correct. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, it's a underlying maintenance problem, like the leaking good problem, but maybe those things ought to be turned into helping out with the kitchen if that is the top priority. And if we have to figure out a top priority to keep the thing in operation, we might have to discuss that. And also, when I was saying 5 years out, I'm just trying to be realistic here. But we hadn't talked about the DPW option, so that may or may not pan out to be something real.
I mean, I'm not trying to drive to that, but I mean,
But it's,
boy, I mean,
yeah, it might be readily available. I don't know.
if they've got a use issue, I mean, and you guys spend, aside from your programming, all in $25,000 a year. Maybe there's a win-win here for everybody. I mean, I think everybody agrees that it's going to move when there's another option available, and that's why the thought of, you all fundraising and diverting money and asking the town to put money into a building that we know it's kaput. It's served us well for 30 years, but, I'm not sure it makes it another 5 without a lot of expenditure.
Could be very expensive. And I did have a meeting inside the Salt Marsh Center a couple of months ago, and 2 of us remarked that the paint didn't look so good. So I'm sympathetic that you want it to look better, and maybe it'd be more attractive for people to come there. But that seems like maybe not the place to spot. I mean, unless there's leaks and things that need to be taken care of, maybe that's not the place to spend money if on a 15 or 20-year paint job if the property's only going to be used for 4 or 5 years.
I think based on the report, there was concern about leaking windows, so the painting addresses rotten wood around the windows and all that kind of thing. So
right. So not having access to that report and knowing sort of what other things are going to be the responsibility of the town or requested of the town, it's difficult to know those things.
I think at this point, this is what we're asking you, and we think otherwise, to the extent that we can, and again, it's an old building, we're doing the best we can, that we pretty much have those covered to get us through the next 5 years. Nobody can guarantee anything, but I think with, other resources or trying to get funding or maybe CPC money or something like that down the road, if other issues come up, we can probably, address those. And again, I think we're going to be more diligent about looking towards what needs to be done instead of addressing it a little bit too late, which is, I think, is what's happening with some of these projects. So.
I would add that the town has been gracious enough to buy a new dishwasher, which is in fact sitting in the middle of the floor or off to the side. So there is a need to get the dishwasher installed. And so I would respectfully ask you to grant the money for us to go, or for the town to go ahead.
And I think it looks overwhelming because unfortunately there were a number of years where nothing was done. So it seems like it's all hitting us all at once is part of it too. So.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Libby or has the town expressed its opinion on this, or are you
Well,
remaining neutral?
We put it forward, and I think we support helping. If it does turn out to be beyond the $15,000 or $16,000, we're gonna have a problem funding. And I'm hearing that there's an understanding about that.
So was the suggestion that we maybe defer those other programs until we find out the kitchen is 15,000, so we could,
Well, the other things that we're talking about, the great roof and painting and stuff, aren't our projects anyway. Those are going to be the NCEA projects.
Okay.
It sounds like the painting and the windows and stuff are necessary, I guess. I don't know about some of the other things, but those weren't ours to begin with, so that would be more the question.
I don't
Does-
know that we have any immediate plans to go forward with painting. We don't,
We're just getting bids.
right, we're getting bids, so that's,
And if, the way I'm hearing it too is, with this request, this is sort of an extraordinary request that you're not expecting to come back next year because you found something else, and the next year because there's something else. This sounds like a one-time event. Am I correct in that?
well, no guarantees, but yes, that's the intent, yes.
Of course.
What if you didn't offer meals? What if you did away with that program? What's it do to your program?
That's a large part of your offerings, right? I mean, yeah, that's what gets people out of the house and brings people down, and I've heard that touted as a reason that the senior community is more healthy, is that they do get out and do these things, so it's critical.
Rachel?
The meals is run through elder services.
Right.
So they would just need notification and they would have to find another location to run the program. So it's not an impact on the senior center that the town operates the programming. They're allowed to use the space. So there already has been a few conversations with Sherry Hunt and Mark, who comes and does the programming, to say at some point when this project moves forward and the kitchen will not be able to be used, or if it doesn't go forward, the kitchen is not okay with the Board of Health, they are aware that they need to provide notification to their office that they have to find an alternate location. It's no different than when the hospital stopped doing Meals on Wheels, so they got somebody else to do it. They would just have to do that. So it really has no impact on either.
But also, whenever something like that happens, it becomes a real community help.
Yes.
And fortunately or unfortunately, people always turn to the town to help resolve their problem. And we've stepped up in many circumstances to deal with that. So I'm very sensitive and sympathetic to when a group like that that's serving people in the community loses their space, what we're going to do about it. So I would be worried about that.
There's also some potential health issues, you know, of the existing conditions, so there's some cost to not making it functional again, just to cleaning it up and making it healthy for people to use the building, so.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong with what I'm about to say on this as part of the discussion, but I'm assuming that people eat in another location other than the kitchen. And certainly Rachel's had the experience, and I know the hospital's had the experience, that they haven't had access to kitchens, and so meals have had to be catered, and probably with no real diminution of nutrition anyway. Maybe they're a little colder. Does that, has that become an acceptable way to deal with this problem? Again, my perspective, if this building was going to be here for the next 20 years in this kind of use, it makes a lot of sense to put the money into it. I just wondering, given that we sort of all acknowledge that it's not going to be, are there other ways to skin this cat without having to spend the money? And it's not that it's the 15,000, it's the fact that it may be
Maybe more.
I
think for a nonprofit that has an operating budget of $25,000 to, add on some meal costs, that's going to be, a
But
hardship.
as Rachel said, it's not you guys that are responsible for it.
No, we don't get any money for allowing it to happen there either. So, we're providing, I guess, a service to the community.
Right.
So Rachel, who does it fall on? Who would pick up that tab for having to cater these meals if this kitchen is inoperable?
It would have to fall to Sherry Hunt at Elder Services and Mark Boudoir, who comes and brings them. They pick the meals up from the kiddies, they bring them over to the senior center. They put them in they reheat them, they do the cleanup there and all that, and they serve it at tables that are in the great room hall.
So the meals are already prepared off-site.
It is the Meals on Wheels program through Elder Services.
I
that is
see.
held there.
Got it.
So what they would have to do, if they were not able to utilize the kitchen, they would have to notify their office on the Cape, and they would have to find an alternate location until, one, the senior center was available again, or a more permanent solution that they would be able to offer the meal program. It's their, I mean, you would know from being on the CRC that they just get the donation amount from the attendance. I think it's just the reason why it's there is it makes the most sense to have that type of meal offered at the senior center where they might be drawn to other activities that are going on there with the other programs.
Okay.
I think the other thing to consider too, it's in a town location versus, town members, which I think is somewhat of a difficulty at times.
Any more discussion? Seeing,
Just a quick question. So what happens to your organization 5 years from now? This building is no longer functional, and the town has moved the programs to the VFW hall or some other location.
Well, I think that's
Does your organization sort of wind up, or what?
Well, I think we still have the asset of the building, which I think leads to some discussions with the town about what happens to the property in the building at that point in time. Two, I think we kind of see NCEA as being a continuing organization because we are a 501c3. We're the entity for donations if people want to help benefit the Salt Marsh Center. And I can see ourselves as being sort of the equivalent of sort of like Friends of the Public Schools or Friends of the Island Home, that's the role that we would be taking. I think it would be different, but I can see us also providing additional resources and funding and services to the Salt Marsh Center when it's under more of the auspices of the town. I think that's very common in most communities to have sort of the friends of that particular center. And basically the Council on Aging can't handle money. So when we fund something like the Elder Expo, if they're sort of hoping to get donations in order to help support that, those monies have to basically funnel through us for that to happen. So I don't think we're going to disappear. I think it's going to be in somewhat of a different role, however. And probably a lot less burdensome when there's not a building to be trying to overrun.
And I presume in the development of this sort of financial crisis, you haven't approached other community foundation in Nantucket or other Landmark House. I'm just thinking there are places that have resources that serve this community that.
I think that's our next step, and I think that's what we're talking about, and we're going to try to meet with the Council on Aging and try to kind of coordinate, look at goals, look at some options, see about fundraising, trying to get some grant money. Maybe CPC or somebody can help us out with some of the financial burden of some of these things. So, again, this board has just sort of been constituted since last summer. So we're really just trying to get rolling again and getting things moving and really done an analysis of the financial issues and the issues with the building. So, we basically realize we have issues and we need to deal with them, and that's part of communicating with the town and you and saying, this is who we are and this is where we are and what we need, and looking to the future and working to the town for the future for the Salt Marsh Center as well. So.
Okay.
all right, seeing no more comment, would someone like to make a motion?
So I'll make a motion to approve the full $16,000 requested.
A second? Second. Any further discussion?
I guess I am a little concerned with the precedent, but I think in light of the programs and the value to the seniors community, I think it's probably money that needs to be spent.
I agree too. I think on Nantucket, 30-year-old building is not that long.
Well,
When you
that's
think
true.
about it.
It's not. I think it's probably more about the lack of maintenance than the age of the building.
But it sounds like you're taking that on as a concern and that you're addressing that. So
Yeah.
I would be in support of this.
So my only other comment would be to reiterate the point I made before, that if it was imagined that the town might be asked for more money, then maybe we get a copy at least of the existing report. Yeah.
It just doesn't have any cost.
Right. So, which is why I guess we don't see it. Because, anyway, that's my only other point.
All right, I'd say everybody in favor of the motion for the $16,000.
Are we all set? I'm
Yep,
sorry.
okay. Done discussion. Say aye.
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 Opposed? No? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see another meeting posted, so I'd like to motion to adjourn.
So, all
right.
the copy of what Deanne had there.
Yeah,
She's talking.
it's a whole lot of ways. It's nice paper, but I don't know what it means. You want to talk about a dead article with a dead board that's about to be reconstituted in 6 weeks about something that no means yes?
Oh, you go.
Next to me,